before we get to today's show, go like us. Go write us a review. If you like this podcast, we would love to hear from you on whatever platform you listen to. We've already gotten some really good reviews, and we would love some more to help us keep climbing. So press pause before you listen to the rest of this episode and go like us on Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Overcast, wherever you listen. We would especially love it if you wrote us a glowing review. Following this season on war, today is our last episode. We've got a new season in the works, a swerve, complete change of pace. This is going to be a season on love, brotherly love, romantic love, Christian love, familial love. That's what we've got coming down the pipe. And without further delay, on with today's show. The story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by, from this day to the ending of the world, before we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. Those words are from Henry V by William Shakespeare. Welcome to Hot Takes on the Classics, a gossipy gallop through the best books ever written. My name is Tim McIntosh. I am joined by Emily Maeda, and you have joined us for our very last episode during our ultimate first season on war. Today is a unique format. Today, Emily and I are going to tell each other what we learned about war from all the readings that we've done this year. Emily, I'm excited. I have 4 hard-earned truths about war. How many do you have?
I've got 5.
You got 5.
But actually, when I was writing them down, I kind of have 10, because a lot of these, I thought, well, you could probably learn the converse as well to many of these. So anyway.
Right. Yeah.
I'm curious if ours are going to overlap, because we haven't discussed these.
I'm curious about that also. We kept them hidden from each other until today. I think because you've got 1 more than me, or gosh, maybe you've got 6 more than me. I think you should start, Emily.
Okay.
What have you told us about war? And maybe I think we should do this. I think that we should kind of save our most potent observation until the end.
I agree. Let's do it.
Okay.
We're going to do like a countdown.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Well, my number 5 is not a revelatory one, but it bears repeating. I think we have learned after all of our readings that war is a moral harm to every person who participates. I don't know what you think of that one, but that is something that comes out very clearly in all that we have read.
Absolutely. Mine is, I've got one along those lines. It's a little bit of a variation. Yeah.
Okay.
But it starts with, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but it starts with, war is hell.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
I'm glad.
It is a moral harm to everybody involved. You are absolutely right.
I'm just thinking, we read the Iliad. We started with the Iliad, and the Iliad is so brutal in its description of battle, right? The epic similes that are used to describe cutting people down, hacking off the limbs. But we do have a little bit more sense of the enervation of the person in it. But then I'm thinking all the way up till All Quiet on the Western Front, which probably is the one that speaks the deepest to the moral harm that war causes.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would.
I have a quote, and I had mentioned this thinker in our first episode, but I have a quote from Timothy Petitsis, and I think it's so good. It gets to this. It was actually my hot take for episode 1, but his writing is this. He says that a culture that created the Iliad, recited it with its war heroes, was a culture that understood the moral harm of war.
Yeah.
He writes that Achilles becomes a berserker, one drunk with the thrill of killing and blood. It is an ecstatic state, but one that debases the person. And I think we've seen that over and over again. So he says, that's when he makes his big statement. The opposite of war is not peace, but liturgy. And he writes this: the opposite of war is not peace, but liturgy, the cognitive, bodily, totalizing act that steadily increases communion instead of cutting it. In liturgy, I give my life for my brother or sister. I renounce retaliation, and I give my body for my sister and brother. And I think his argument there that the moral harm has to be counteracted by an equally potent moral ennobling is really powerful for what we've seen from the effects of war on people throughout the books we've read.
Emily, this does not come from our reading, but this is a story that a friend told me. She was serving in one of the armed forces, and she was serving alongside someone, and their job was to call in coordinates on missile strikes. I will never tell you who this person is, for obvious reasons. And this person called in the wrong coordinates. And so innocent people were killed. Okay, so that in itself is horrible enough.
Right.
But the response of the people in the room with him, and these are not, I don't think, hopefully not representative, was to celebrate that he had, because they had all made this mistake. And so they kind of not cheered him on, but sort of hey, welcome to the club. And they kind of treated it like the celebratory moment. And for him, every day on the year, he would remember that day, and it was debilitating for him. He was in college, I think on the GI Bill afterwards, and on the day, whatever, 3 years after that event, he couldn't get out of his car to go to class. He wanted nothing more to just go join class.
Yes.
And part of what made it's when you say kind of liturgy is the opposite of war, I think about the kind of liturgical celebration of that awful moment. You know what I mean? It was a little bit of a liturgy, like an inverse.
Yeah, that's the dark liturgy. It's the debasing of Henry V's band of brothers, right?
Yeah, right.
Not band of brothers in the sense of sharing nobly, but band of brothers and we've all done this dark deed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we weren't reading pacifist texts, but the sense that we can overlook that sort of glaring reality that war is a moral harm. Yeah. So what's your fourth one? What's the bottom of your list?
The bottom of my list is propaganda is crucial to modern warfare.
Ooh. Good one.
Propaganda is crucial to modern warfare. So I got this from Mein Kampf and from Clausewitz's On War.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, there is a break during this season. There was a break for me around the time of the American Civil War, around the time of Clausewitz's writings, around the time of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, where warfare changes its nature. It becomes, instead of a conflict practiced by a relatively small group of people that is driven not just by technology. Technology is always affecting warfare.
Always a part of it.
Always a part of it. But now technology is becoming maybe the prime factor in what wins a war. And the big change for this subject, propaganda is crucial to modern warfare, is that war becomes total.
Yes.
When war is declared between modern nations, the entire structure of that culture bends itself toward the manufacturing of armaments, preparing soldiers, espionage, wartime communication, and everything in those operations is dependent upon belief that the enemy is horrible, dreadful monster that must be destroyed.
Absolutely.
I don't want to say that propaganda is always wrong. Like, propaganda is inflation. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, there are, I think there was lots of propaganda practiced during World War II about and against the Nazis. And I think maybe it was inflated, but oh my goodness, the Nazis were a vile, vile camp. And so I'm kind of trying to walk a fine line here and not say that there's no such thing as a just war in the modern age, because everything is based on propaganda, and propaganda is always lies. Propaganda is always inflation. And some of that inflation, go ahead.
Well, I think we talked about this in Mein Kampf. We sort of disagreed, right? Because I'm thinking a turn towards propaganda is always wrong. Like a turn towards vilifying the enemy is always wrong. It's never helpful.
Okay,
because
so
if you
I think the
actually, if
counter
you look
argument.
at, hold on one second. If you look at U.S. propaganda in both wars, I mean, I think it's a little bit what Hitler said. You meet the opponent, and you realize they're human beings just like you.
For sure.
And that,
For
I
sure.
mean, I don't think that ever helps your cause. But I mean, I understand the turn toward it because it's an emotional appeal. I get that, where logical arguments sometimes don't reach people in the same way. But I always think it's dangerous. Anyhow, I agree with you that
Here's the counter argument, though. The counter argument is you get 18 months into a war and your propaganda, you're soft pedaling your propaganda, and the American public says, you know what? The Germans are like, we're not really fighting any cause that needs to be fought.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I understand. I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem of society. I'm suspicious of making the appeal completely emotional if it's vilifying the enemy. I would have to say, if you're thinking about modern propaganda and war, that the Ukraine government has done an amazing job.
Really?
Of messaging their war, which I don't think relies upon vilifying Russians.
Do you think that is because they have so many Russians living within their border?
No, I just think that they've got really astute people running their PR.
Huh.
But anyway,
okay, that's a good counter argument. That's great.
Go ahead.
My viewpoint is, I'm just going to have to say it. It's like, it's pretty cynical.
Yeah, it is pretty cynical. Dang, are you saying the ends justify the means?
I think every utterance on this show could be getting into that territory.
Maybe so. But I'm just not quite comfortable with that. But I agree with you that I agree with you on the thing about the shift, because I felt it deeply as well. And it harkens to one of my points. That shift between sort of hand-to-hand combat, for lack of a better term. I mean, right? It's
yes, right.
So
when you can
ways.
Look your enemy in the face.
Yes.
When we lost that, we lost something. I mean, we're not saying like, oh man, the good old days when warfare was
just chop people apart. But you could only. But the thing is you could only do so much of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. That's the thing with the machine that extends the ability to kill. Like, because you just couldn't keep killing. Like, it wasn't humanly possible. There was a human limit to it that the machine transcends.
Let's hear your number 4,
okay.
Emily.
Give you my number 4. Battle shift course on the basis of the leader.
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
So, I mean, here are the ones I'm thinking of. Now, I was actually thinking that you could make the counter argument on this one as well, because we've read just as many accounts of like the fog of war and not being able to determine actually what's happening.
Yeah.
But the battles that shift on the basis of the leader, I'm thinking the Battle of Agincourt. I mean, that is pretty clear.
Henry V. Yeah.
Pretty clear. Even in the Iliad, there's all those situations where, you know, the Greeks are coming strong and here come the Trojans, and Hector rallies his troops. And then Odysseus and Diomedes call them back, you know. So you get this sense of, if it hadn't been for those leaders, the line would have broken.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Thucydides and some of those battles. I'm thinking of Coriolanus and who's the other guy?
Caesar. You mean Caesar?
No, who's paired with Coriolanus? Oh, Alcibiades.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking of Caesar in the Gallic Wars, how he represents himself, which is probably hyperbolic, but nonetheless, you do have a sense that Caesar is a great war leader, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
So he reports it like, and then he was here, and then he was there, and then he did this. But yeah, without him sort of saying forward to the breach. I'm also thinking of kind of the counterexample of Kutuzov, who doesn't necessarily display his leadership by going forward, but strategically decides to retreat and saves, and that's you can't see the shift, but the shift has occurred once he decides to do that.
Right.
I mean, Napoleon.
I would say Robert E. Lee.
Yes.
From Killer Angels.
Yes. But wouldn't you say he makes the decision to charge and he probably shouldn't have?
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, right? But the other times that Lee had done it, it had been the right choice. The other times he had pushed that way, it had been the right choice.
And his men longed to fight for him, would do anything for him.
Yeah.
I mean, just heralded as one of the great generals, even though he fought with the South in the Civil War.
And I think that quality of battle shift on the basis of the great leader is part of what enraptures us with war, don't you think?
Yes.
Because
I should say that you and I are believers that, let me try to say this, I'm going to say it a little bit hyperbolically, in keeping with my deep affection for propaganda.
Great.
Let me say it a little bit hyperbolically. Democratic initiatives toward leadership are probably a little bit overrated. And really, people consolidate around a leader that they believe in.
Totally.
I mean, I see this in business all the time when I will not mention the name, but we have a university who got a new president about 2 years ago. And the university, like so many institutions of higher learning, had been struggling, really struggling. This new president came in and she was an absolute dynamo, absolutely energy, intelligence, will. And you can watch everyone around her in her cabinet, down to the professors, down to the people who are cleaning the hallways, galvanize. Mm-hmm. I remember going to her inauguration and the feeling in the room was, we've been in trouble. It's all changing.
Yeah. There's somebody to...
of her.
Yep. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Okay, what's yours?
Next up. This is a follow-up to your the first one that you led with. War is hell, but if you're going to engage in a war, win. Don't let nice people...
Okay, that's really funny because my next one, can I just say it? And
let's do these together, The
best war is one that ends quickly.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's the same observation, isn't it?
I think it's like maybe variations of the same one.
Yeah.
Let me give the quote that I'm thinking of is from Clausewitz's On War. Here it is. Quote, "Kind-hearted people might of course think that there was some ingenious way to disarm or defeat the enemy without too much bloodshed, and might imagine that this is the true goal of the art of war. Pleasant as it sounds, it is a fallacy that must be exposed. War is such a dangerous business that mistakes that come from kindness are often the very worst." Is that in keeping with, like, if you're going to fight, it's got to be short?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of the art of war, right?
Yeah.
Because Sun Tzu says something very similarly. Do everything possible to win. Like, make sure you win so that the war does not go on.
Yeah.
Like, don't make it your aim to have a 10-year war like the Trojans and the Greeks.
Right.
Don't do that. It's terrible for everybody involved. I'm thinking also of Killer Angels, in the sense that Chamberlain has of war is changing and we need to end this. We need to not keep going.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, he recognizes, at least according to the author of Killer Angels, that the rifle is now the sort of technology that is changing the face of war.
Yeah. you can't line up and shoot at each other any longer. Right?
No, well, the charging across a battlefield is a fool's errand because of the power of the rifle. Yeah.
I think we are in agreement. Okay, what's your next one?
Okay, so this is for me, number 2. The battlefield is intoxicating. And here's the reasons why. I mean, this is one of the many reasons why. It is so rare when we as human beings can be completely unified, psychically, spiritually, physically, toward a singular goal, which is the destruction of our enemy. Our lives are full of distractions and rivalries and divided loyalties. And my daughter wants this. My wife wants something different. Our neighbor wants something different. My boss wants something different. And I can't be completely unified. I have to adjudicate between all of these different needs. And there's something sort of psychically draining, shattering.
Completely.
But in battle, everything is unified toward a singular goal. And I should say specifically on the battlefield, there's all sorts of...
Everything disappears.
Everything disappears. And the episode that I'm thinking of from our reading is War and Peace, that Tolstoy does this beautiful, brilliant form of writing on a couple of occasions in War and Peace, where we enter the kind of heart of the soldier. In one instance, the soldier is shot off his horse, and everything before and after that slows down. There's a sort of a dreamlike state. And haven't you competed maybe in a piano competition or in some sort of physical contest where, like, the best moments, you are so completely unified with that piano that everything slows down.
Yes.
Everything becomes a little bit elegiac. I think that is the word. And warfare does that.
It does.
And of course, the counterpart is, it does that toward the destruction of another human being or group of human beings. I totally get that.
Right.
But still, the battlefield is intoxicating. That's my number 2.
Yeah, and you can't deny it. You can't deny it, right? You deny it at your own risk to not understand that draw of the clarity, right? The clarity that it like everything is clear, everything is more intense. That harkens a little bit to one of mine. That's not my second, but it harkens to it. My second is a little bit like your 4th. I said, the heroism of war that is recounted in the great text is obliterated in modern war.
Yeah.
So when you said that you felt this big shift, I also felt it. And I've taught all of these modern wars, and I'm so fascinated by them, but I haven't felt that shift until doing this read, where we read chronologically. So
you're starting to see different books, different texts, all kind of talking about this same change in various ways. Is that what happened? Ways.
Yeah, well, just that experience, like you said, of total war, right? So, I guess probably it's the effect of reading it chronologically, because we've read all of these texts before. This isn't the first time we've read them, but it's reading them, it's seeing the arc, the trajectory of how war is dealt with. I'm even thinking back to Prudentius and the Psychomachia, where he is still dealing with that heroic quality of war. He's saying that for the Christian, this should be transcended into a real understanding of who the real enemy is, which is sin and the flesh, right? That you're warring against internal. But he's trying to capture that sense of the heroic quality. But in modern war, and we even noted this in our episode on art and music, there are like the paintings that surround sort of great battles, they're done. Like it doesn't come again.
Yeah.
Because the slaughter of the machine is inhuman. I mean, that it sounds funny to say there's a human quality to killing. That seems a funny thing to say, but you simply can't keep chopping people down. You are physically exhausted, right? You can't do it.
The Otto Dix painting is such a great representation of kind of how different war is after the mid 1800s, especially after World War I.
Especially after World War I. I mean, World War I is the dividing point, but I do think we saw that in Killer Angels, the recognition of this time of heroic war where it is sort of mano a mano, hand to hand, you know?
Yeah.
Now this is depersonalized. Now you're just mowing people down.
Right.
It reminds me of a study that Timothy Petitsis chronicled in Ethics of Beauty, where after World War II, they did a study on soldiers to see how many people, or how many of the soldiers aimed at other combatants. And the number was unbelievably high that they did not aim. The people who aimed...
Really?
It was 80%. The people who aimed were the snipers, and those people had horrible repercussions after war, right? And so part of the Army's drive when they professionalized the Army in the 50s was to get soldiers to kill other people because, like, we're not built to kill other people,
right?
You know? So anyway, that's my number 2, that that sense of like the battlefield being intoxicating. I don't know if it's quite the same anymore.
Maybe not.
Do you think?
Maybe not. Yeah, I wonder.
I mean, even when you read accounts of Vietnam, even of the war in Iraq, you don't have that sense any longer, you know?
Yeah. That's a great point. With the change of warfare, the battlefield may be a little bit less intoxicating because it's more of a technological event.
Yes. It's mediated through technology a far greater extent than it ever has been.
Yeah. But technology, the sword is a technology.
Yes.
But the sword, there's this Heidegger understanding about when a person takes up the hammer, especially when they become skilled at the use of a hammer, becomes an extension of the body of the one who wields it. And I feel like the sword is the same thing.
Yes.
Now, any technology, I think, can kind of become an extension of our bodies, but the matriculation of advanced technologies do require a much more cerebral approach. I think that does like take away this sort of intoxication factor of warfare.
Yeah, I completely agree. The mediation of technology changes our experience of it. Okay, we should take a break, shouldn't we?
Let's take a little intermission.
Because Emily, we can't give away our number ones yet.
We cannot give away our number ones yet. We're going to do that when we come back. But I first want to say, this podcast is platformed by Classical U and classicalpress.com. I went to classicalu.com the other day, and the opening big banner is Learn to Teach with Master Teachers. And a lot of people who are listening to this show, maybe they're not teachers in a public school classroom, but they're teaching. Maybe they're teaching employees. Maybe they're teaching their kids. And learning to teach with master teachers is what Classical U is all about. There's great interviews between Chris Perrin and master teachers. It's a great place to explore. So I encourage you, check out classicalu.com or Classical Academic Press. I really kind of want to put the highlight on Classical U because it's so interesting. Selfishly, I just realized that I am one of the banner teacher pictures on Classical U. So this may feel kind of self-serving. It was not intended that way. Quick, let's resort to our like regularly scheduled program. Emily, before we get to your number one and my number one, you had a few others. I would love to hear them.
Well, one of my others is that war would never be waged without a population of young men who see the glory and not the harm. I just think that isn't that true?
Yes.
Now I see it.
It's so true that you have almost revealed my number one.
Oh wow! Well,
you almost revealed my number one. Yep.
I have these sons. I have 4 sons, and I recognized it with my eldest that, oh, these are the people who fight the wars, which is, great because they're brave and valiant, and they also don't have a prefrontal cortex that is closed, and they don't see what all the ramifications of that choice, but they feel the nobility,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I think we see that over and over again. It crushes you in All Quiet in the Western Front, these idealistic boys who go in and then feel that their young adulthood has been ripped from them, right? Because they believe they're following the scent of what they see as glory and honor, and it just doesn't turn out that way.
Emily, how old is your second youngest boy?
He is 13.
I just want to remind readers that sounds to us like, oh yeah, he would never be involved in war. But actually, throughout a lot of human civilization, he would have been involved in war.
Completely.
He would have been an officer in the British Navy. Clausewitz was very, very young when he saw his first, I think under 10 years old when he saw his first battle, and saw battle in armed engagement all throughout his years up until his adulthood. So, right, yeah.
They're
These are the ones
into it, right?
They are. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and Henry V, the English are so incensed by the murder of the boys, remember? Behind the line.
Mm-hmm.
And that they were there carrying the banners, beating the drum, but they were supposed to be left alone, but not so in the Battle of Agincourt.
Yeah.
So that was another one of mine that didn't make it onto the list. But
don't worry, I got it in a different form, but I got it.
Okay. Well, are we ready for our number ones?
Yeah. Why don't I go first? It's similar enough to what you were just saying. Okay, here it is.
Okay, go.
The force that creates many wars, wins many of those wars, and impedes peace to those wars is the gargantuan size of the male drive toward climbing the hierarchy.
It's a good one.
I'm thinking about, why don't I just say it again? Because it was quite a mouthful. The force that creates war, wins wars, stops peace to those wars is the gigantic, gargantuan size of the male hierarchy drive.
Who says that? Is that you?
I'm thinking about, that's me. That I remember reading that classic written by me.
Hey,
no.
Tim.
No.
Oh.
No. I mean, it is what I think, but I saw it most clearly in Plutarch, Alcibiades, and Coriolanus, these two incredible generals who ended up switching sides away from their beloved motherland to fight with and for the enemy because they were dishonored, or they perceived themselves to be dishonored. And I just think, how many stories can be told?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have enough time to tell the stories of a man who was dishonored publicly in some way and could not rest until that dishonor was put right. I just think it's such a deep, profound drive. And I do think it's much more male, which is not to say that, I'm not claiming that women don't have honor, but I do think it typically manifests itself in very different ways.
I 100% agree. Yes, I agree. It's not that women have any less desire for it, but that sense of the scorned man, I guess, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So are you in that saying that the scorned man drives a lot of war? I guess, yeah. Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
I mean, we could look at it with Hitler. Hitler was a scorned man, Yeah. I mean,
I think the settlement after World War I think that
the German people,
the German people were punished because of a perceived dishonor done to the French and the English.
Yeah.
And the French and the English, instead of being sort of strategic about what happened in the peace after World War I.
Yeah.
It became all about like honor and punitive.
Yeah, no. And
punishing the German
exactly.
people.
That's, we didn't really discuss it, but I think now is the appropriate point. The contrast between the settling at the Treaty of Versailles and the Congress of Vienna, the settling of the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah. Because
that was a model in non-punitive settlement. They were looking for a division of powers across Europe. They understood that if they punished France would have nothing but trying to overcome that, right? So Talleyrand is part of the settlement. France is very equitably treated. Legitimacy and stability were their words. I mean, and it led to 100 years of peace. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's true. It's fascinating to think about it. I mean, you could even think about it now with Putin, who I do think perceives himself as a scorned man,
Yeah. Right.
In the wake of the fall of communism, that Russia was scorned and that he is taking that on.
Been dishonored in some way.
Yep. And he's reestablishing honor.
Right.
Through war.
I'm dying to hear number one from you, Emily.
Well, I think you kind of already said it.
Oh, really?
I'm saying it in slightly a different way, but it's very similar. War brings out the most admirable qualities as well as the basest in humans. Yeah. This is a little bit of the enervating quality of the battlefield, right? The livening of every sinew toward the struggle to live in an experience that is shared. I do think that aspect of the shared experience, the band of brothers, so powerful. Everything is intensified in a way that normal life just never achieved. And well, go ahead.
Did you ever see the movie The Straight Story?
No.
It's a David Lynch movie. David Lynch is kind of known for his fantastical, dreamlike, semi-horror films.
Didn't he just die?
He's been all over my Instagram, and I've been wondering why.
Yeah,
Did he
because
just
I think
die?
he died. Yeah.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. But anyway.
Oh, I had no idea. He did a movie called The Straight Story, realism from beginning to end, and it's a true story about, I believe, a World War II veteran whose license was taken away because he was getting older, but he still had lots of vigor.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides that he is going to go visit a relative. And so do you know how he does it? He gets on
a lawnmower.
He gets on a lawnmower.
Oh, I did see this movie.
There's a scene, if you recall, where he stops along the way at a bar, and I can't remember. He's visiting with a fellow veteran, and this man has been throughout this movie been crotchety and just like hard, bristle. And he sits down and he's sharing a beer with this fellow veteran, and he starts crying because this is the only man in the movie who actually understands what he went through.
Yeah, right. Once again, that band of brothers.
The band of brothers, right.
I'm thinking about it. I have never gone to war. You haven't either.
No.
We've missed out on this experience. But I can say that when our son was diagnosed with cancer, that's a similar experience where everything in your body, in your child's body, in the whole family is geared toward staying alive. And there is this intensity. And our son was a teen when this happened, and there was such an intensity, like this fight. It's war imagery, honestly.
Yeah.
Fight. And you're geared up, and everything is intense, so intense. Like everything is intense. The sunset is intense, right? Because you feel you are sitting on the precipice of life and death. Like that's part of war. Like it's the end of A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor, where the misfit holds the gun to the old lady's head and said she would have been a great woman if she had had a gun pointed at her every day of her life, right?
Right.
Because
there's a refining aspect to the threat of like physical death.
Yes.
It makes you take account of the most important things, and it consolidates you with the people who are in the fight with you.
Exactly. And everything goes, right? And it's all clear, and you know what you have to do. Just like you said, sort of the wear and tear of everyday life where there's so many gray areas. None of this is gray. It's very clear.
Yeah.
And it is so, it's the same thing that we've seen afterward in some of the accounts that we have seen afterward, mostly in the modern era, of that letdown, what you're talking about from the movie, right?
So Emily, I want to ask you about this because I feel like I know your family's story fairly well, but this is a part that I've never heard. Once your son was pronounced in the clear from his cancer, what was that like? You were returning home from war. What was that like for your family?
It was really hard. I mean, people don't really talk about that when he was going through it because he was a teen and he had a better understanding. I mean, I think he was really depressed. It reminded me, because at that point I was teaching the Lost Generation books like Great Gatsby, The Sun Also Rises.
Yeah.
I was like, he's the Lost Generation, because you think, I survived everything for this. I survived everything to take a math test. Is that really what you have to offer me?
Right. To eat dinner at Zaxby's, really?
Yeah, that's what I stayed alive for.
Yeah.
And that sense of being cut off from the community because nobody really understands,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the returning war veteran who, just like you said, that man who, as an old man, starts crying because nobody has really shared that experience, which was so deeply intense, so shaping.
Yeah.
But you don't have anybody to talk about it with. So, yeah, I mean, it's the courage, even the ingenuity of like staying, becoming instinctual on the battlefild, right?
Yeah.
Like figuring out how to stay alive, the resolve, the determination, the physical strength.
Yeah.
It's all admirable.
Yeah.
And it's brought about by this intensity of trying to stay alive. Right. So I have a quote for you, which I think sums this up. I think I read it in the first episode, but I'm going to read it again. And it's written by a woman who declared herself a pacifist. But this is what she wrote. This glamour, this magic, this incomparable keying up of the spirit in a time of mortal conflict is what constitutes the pacifist's real problem. War's honor is dishonest, but the challenge to spiritual endurance, the intense sharpening of all the senses, the vitalizing consciousness of common peril for a common end remain to allure young people. The glamour may be short-lived, but while it lasts, no emotion known to man seems as yet to have quite the compelling power of this enlarged vitality.
Wow. That nails it. That really gets to it.
Doesn't it? Isn't that a great...
It's a great quote.
Maybe it takes the pacifist to understand.
Maybe it does. Because she's been fighting it. If she's fighting it as hard, if she's fighting it, this is her life's work. And she's like, why can I not make progress?
Yeah.
Oh, because the battlefield is intoxicating.
Yeah. So that was Vera Brittain from A Testament of Youth. And yeah, I do think that is kind of what we have seen, isn't it? Like the best and also the worst. I mean, the cruelty, the vanity, the ego, the destruction. I mean, so all of the best things are mirrored by a lot of darkness as well.
Emily, I think we've just completed our season on war.
Wow.
It flew
nice job,
by.
Tim.
Nice job, Emily. Like not long ago, this was just a kind of daydream for us.
Sure
and
was.
We just finished the first weekend. Hey, the first season. I want to, for those listeners who are interested in season 2, Emily and I have agreed we're going to do a little bit of a variation on how we've done last season for this forthcoming season. The first book we're going to read is C.S. Lewis' book called The Four Loves, because it's a kind of framework that people use when they talk about love and the many different kinds of love there are. So if you want to read along with this last year, make sure you make sure you have a copy of C.S. Lewis's Four Loves, because that's going to be the blueprint for what we discuss during this next year. Emily, any closing thoughts?
Well, I do have a little bit of rapid fire questions.
Oh, yeah. Let's do rapid fire.
Do you want to? I kind of want to hear your responses to these, and maybe
Okay.
I'll disagree with you.
I'm ready.
Before we go, just so we can revisit some of these amazing people that we've been reading about.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Tim. Clausewitz or Kutuzov?
Kutuzov.
Wow. Iliad or Aeneid?
Iliad.
Really? Boy, these are
Yeah.
surprising. Achilles or
Wait,
Hector?
you're surprised at that? Like we talked about, we made a good defense for the Aeneid.
I know. I just thought you defended the Aeneid so well that you were going to, change your mind on that.
No, the Iliad is just the granddaddy. It's the granddaddy.
Okay, now, we didn't do rapid fire on our first episode. And so, because this is a hotly debated topic in my home, Achilles or Hector?
Achilles.
No, take it back.
No. And tell your boys when we visit them next month that I'll be prepared to take all comers if they're going to talk
take
about
me
Hector.
Too. Hector all the way.
Okay.
Hector all
I'll be
the
ready.
way. Okay,
I'll
now,
be ready.
Sun Tzu or Clausewitz?
Oh, this might be the hardest one. Clausewitz. Just because I think they teach very similar lessons, but there's something about, I think I'm voting for it because I live in Clausewitz's world. I don't live in Sun Tzu's world.
I was going to say, doesn't it have to be Sun Tzu because he's the OG?
That's a strong point.
Come on. It's funny. I've been almost opposite of you on all of these, even though I haven't said it. I've just guffawed at all of your answers.
Well, this is an opportunity for you to learn. This is a great...
Thank you for teaching me, oh wise one. Kutuzov or Napoleon?
Kutuzov. My gosh, that's the easiest one. Who would ever choose Napoleon?
Come on. He ravaged Europe. I know, I wouldn't choose him either. Stravinsky or Gorecki?
That's the second easiest one. Gorecki.
Really?
Oh, is that
I
hard
don't
for
know.
you?
I think I would choose Stravinsky, but Gorecki
You
did
know
move us
more of
deeply.
Stravinsky's work, don't you?
Well, yeah, but I don't know. Anyway, I was thinking Stravinsky. It's interesting that we are going almost opposite on all of these. Killer Angels versus All Quiet on the Western Front.
These are
two historical fiction, I guess.
Brilliant works. All Quiet on the Western Front.
Really? I'm with you on that. That's mine. Okay, now I just felt like we have to get the Psychomachia in there somehow, but there isn't actually another text that's really like it. So I'm going with the two unusual texts that we read that most people don't talk about. Psychomachia versus Song of Roland.
Song of Roland.
What? Okay.
You would choose Psychomachia.
Yeah.
You have a real tender spot in your heart for Psychomachia.
I sort of do. Because he's trying to say to people, don't fight people, fight the terror within. Don't fight other people. I'm sympathetic to that. I'm sympathetic
I vote
to
for that sentiment.
Okay.
Absolutely, I vote for that sentiment. Listeners, thanks so much for joining us. Hey, listen, there's a Classical U podcast that was recently dropped in which Rebecca Richard, Classical U's new full-time team member, speaks to director Jesse Hake about the love of learning, of blooming late, of Charlotte Mason. If you don't know who Charlotte Mason is, let this be your introduction. And also Life at Sea. Go listen to the Classical U podcast with Rebecca Richard and Jesse Hake. And with that, Emily Maeda, this is us signing off for our first season of Hot Takes on the Classics, a season on war.
Great to do it with you, Tim.
Great to do it with you.